Yeah, the call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home. Call of wild's always bringing me home.
Hello, wild ones, and welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm so excited to have Vanessa Chakour. I was just going over this with me today, and you just have an amazing list of accomplishments. So you're an author, a former professional boxer, a land steward. What else could we? Herbalist. What else do we add in there?
Student of nature, I would say. Yeah, and nature advocate for sure. So,
Oh, sorry, you broke up a little bit, Vanessa. What did you
oh,
say
okay.
again?
Yeah, no, I would say all of the work really stems from a desire to really peel back layers of social conditioning, reconnect to my own animal nature, and nature advocacy has really been at the core of all my work. You know, working on behalf of other species. So herbalism, land stewardship, and sometimes these days I'm kind of even preferring to call it collaboration with land, really
Mm.
stems from all of that. And the boxing for me was just an aspect of my own healing, as writing has been. Writing has been kind of twofold. It's like a way to, you know, put things down on the page that I was holding in my body that I wasn't able to say aloud. So, healing, like embodied trauma that I'd carried, just put it down on the page to get it out of my body. And then now writing, as you know, has been a way to speak on behalf of others that I care deeply about, doing my very best to speak on behalf of other animals and earth and plants and fungi and all of those other creatures I love so much. So for me, all these things are very, very entwined.
Yeah, it's you weave them all very beautifully. I have your most recent book here that I have not finished yet, but I'm pretty close. It's a really great read. Just wanted to show everybody Earthly Bodies. And you have another book that you wrote a couple years ago called Awakening Artemis, which is kind of the flora portion of the Earthly Bodies book as well, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. And it goes into a little more of the full scope of my healing journey. And this is Earthly Bodies is a little bit more of like a limited time frame. So, but yes, every chapter in Awakening Artemis is devoted to a different medicinal plant.
I love the way that you weave your story in with the different creatures that you use as examples and metaphors in your life. It's kind of what I try to do in my daily life, and when I found your work, I was just like really blown away, and I really connect with it and resonate with it so much, as I know so many other people out there do as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I I really love your work also. In the beginning of the book you start with wolves, which is obviously one of my favorite animals. I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite, but
Yeah.
um when you started at the Wolf Conservation Center, you held classes though to connect people with wolves, right?
Yeah, well, so it was a little, what I saw that I offered to the Wolf Conservation Center. So the Wolf Conservation Center is in Westchester. It's in upstate New York. And at the time, I was living in Brooklyn, and I had been advocating for wolves just online, signing petitions. It was when I started really working on their behalf when they lost their endangered species protections. This was in, I believe, 2011. And so I've always had a really deep connection to wolves. I grew up with dogs as family members. So to me, it was natural to sort of have this deep emotional connection to their ancestors, the wolves.
Mhm.
And I also, whether it's plants or animals, just have a really, I don't know, I feel very called to speak on behalf of misunderstood species. So wolves are one of the most misunderstood species that have been really just the victim of fable, the myth, and storytelling, and among many, many other things. So that have led to the persecution. So part of the aspect of that chapter is just like, these misplaced fears that we hold. Fearing wolves is a misplaced fear, which we can talk about later. But to get back to your question, So when I learned that there was a wolf conservation center just an hour away from Brooklyn, I was so excited. This opportunity to work with wolves or on behalf of wolves in person. And it's important for your listeners to know that there are no wolves in the Northeast. So the Conservation Center is a center for wildlife reintroduction. So they have well, it depends. The number fluctuates, but they have enclosures of red wolves, which are the most critically endangered canine species. And there's roughly about 24 left in the wild at the moment, and Mexican gray wolves, which is another critically endangered species. So they're part of this wildlife reintroduction program. So that's part of the Wolf Conservation Center. And those wolves are sort of like what they call off exhibit. We don't really interact with them, but they're there. We feel them, we howl with them. It's really amazing. They just don't want them to be too acclimated to humans. And the other wolves who I was able to connect with are what they call ambassador wolves. And those wolves are wolves whose parents were raised in zoos or who can't be released to the wild for one reason or another. And they wind up being teaching wolves, so to speak, where we can learn about the wolf's true nature and interface with them without petting or touching them or anything like that, which is not necessary to learn to respect these animals. So
Right.
my role there was to reconnect people to land, because people came for the wolves. There's these majestic, really charismatic animals, and yet they don't exist in the Northeast. And at the same time, so many people are disconnected from Earth. They have what is referred to as plant blindness. So looking outside, maybe seeing nature as beautiful scenery, maybe knowing how to identify a few species, but really not knowing how to just build intimacy with the land under their feet, which is really, really important. So it was interesting. So that was my role, teaching about the ecosystem of Earth through the lens of plants, while the Wolf Conservation Center taught about the ecosystem of Earth through the lens of wolves and how they're really, really vital ecological stewards. So that was our partnership. I really taught herbalism. And like I said earlier, herbalism is a gateway to building a deeper intimacy with Earth through the lens of different medicinal plants that we often overlook.
I really love that connection. It's so important because I'm from New York, so I'm similar, but on Long Island, where we're very starved for wildlife, I would say for the most part. I mean, we have a couple of little creatures. I feel like I'm pretty lucky. I have like a little space where I have a pathway in my backyard where sometimes deer cross over, and I've only seen a little fox once, but I think it's very important to oh, Vanessa, did I lose you?
No, I'm
Oh,
still
okay.
here.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. The connection. I just wanted to make sure I didn't freeze. But I think that also the Northeast is very starved for that carnivore, like that need for the balance. Like there's just this lack of balance in nature that I feel like we especially see here, and really particularly by me in Long Island, there really is barely any carnivores or anything like that. I actually just went down to North Carolina to visit my friend Aspen, who's a wildlife photographer and guide in the Alligator River National Wildlife National Park, I believe. And I was able to see one of the critically endangered wild red wolves.
Oh, wow.
I mean, very off in the distance, but to be able to see one in the wild at all, I felt really, really grateful to just be like able to see one. And we got to see so many other animals that I feel like I don't get to connect with up here, and that were so beautiful, and they were so close, and we respected their boundaries, and like they noticed us, and then they moved off. A big part of her thing is also uh ethical photography and ethical
Mhm.
viewing. And I guess this leads to like a good question is like how can we make sure that we're educating people and that like they respect nature in a way? Do you think that's maybe that they can't necessarily respect nature unless they go into nature? And then maybe like a second part to that is like are they not able to see these creatures as they are because they're not able to meet aspects of themselves?
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting question. So in terms of not meeting aspects of themselves, like it makes it difficult to connect with other species. Um,
Yeah, like they're like almost, I'm thinking almost like their mental health, like if they're not able to, like a big part of your journey in earthly bodies was also like kind of connecting back to like your animal self and like
yeah.
respecting your animal nature and your feelings and your emotions. A lot of people, I think, bury that
Mm,
and aren't able to fully see and understand animals as they are because they can't see past that lens of
mm,
themselves, if that makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah, that it's a big question, right? And I think
Yeah.
the way I've come to see it, and this has come through many, many layers and lots of kind of work and healing. And I've arrived at a place where I really see myself as an animal, as part of the ecosystem. So part of what I challenge in Earthly Bodies is this myth of human exceptionalism. And again, that like I was saying about wolves, that comes from stories that we've told ourselves. So seeing myself as part of the ecosystem is has been deeply healing for me. So it's not just healing for other species. It's like, wow, I have this massive family. If I mentioned this too in the book, like, if we look at evolution, we all evolved from the same single-celled organism. We're literally related. We have distant relatives in common. So yeah, I find that to be deeply healing. I have a Gary Snyder quote in the book that nature is not a place to visit, nature is home. So I see nature home as existing beyond the walls of my house. This is just an enclosure, but home is all the land that exists around me wherever I am. So finding ourselves at home in the wild, whatever that means, it doesn't have to mean you live in a untouched forest, but it means that you get to a place where you get to know species around you, get to learn who they are. And I don't think it's necessary to be healed in order to do that. I think that can be simultaneous. So, for example, I live in Western Massachusetts now, and I am lucky enough to live in a very rural, gorgeous area where there's wild all around me. But I did live in New York City for over 20 years, and part of my work there was reintroducing to people to the wildlife in the city. And sometimes we think we have to go away from where we are to reconnect with nature, but nature is, first of all, we are nature, and nature is around us no matter where we are. So in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, for example, there are countless medicinal plants. So reintroducing people to species as individuals is deeply healing. So giving one plant as an example, mugwort, which grows through the cracks in sidewalks in Long Island, in New York City, here in Western Mass, all over. And learning about the history and lore of that plant is just like, oh, wow, it just opens a little bit of a door. And I always use the expression of like lifting the veil that stands between us and the natural world. And then it piques curiosity about other species. And what I've seen over and over again with my students and with myself, that the more I deepen intimacy with the ecosystems around me, the more I fall in love with the land and therefore want to take better care of land. And I also think, another part of your question is it's just misunderstanding, right? It's these stories we've internalized, not just about other species, but about ourselves. So, for example, looking through a feminist lens, women are often taught to contort our bodies to be more, perfect for others, for the male gaze or whatever you want to call it. To alter our faces, our appearance, all these things. This is an internalized kind of story that we have to kind of get out of our bodies in order to accept
Right.
our own and the miraculous nature of our bodies, which is one of the reasons boxing was so healing for me. And then, we also have to unravel the stories we're told about animals that are not true, that cultivate this misplaced fear. So, for example, I'm a ambassador for Project Coyote, and those animals are very misunderstood. They're really maligned for their incredible resilience. And, so it's just like we just need to learn. We just need to cultivate ecological literacy. And I think it can be simultaneous. We can heal ourselves, heal our relationship with Earth at the same time. It doesn't have to be one and then the other necessarily.
Cool. Yeah, I think that that definitely was a great way to answer that full question that I gave you. So thank you. I think coyotes. I think also it's the way that you blend your work with trying to help and align with different charities is also really beautiful. I try to do the same thing with all of my clothing and like the art that I draw for my clothing.
Oh,
So
amazing. That's cool.
$5 for each of my animal designs. Whatever animals on that design, I try to donate $5 or I donate $5 towards that charity. So for my wolf one, like this one, I donate to Apex Protection
Mm.
Project, which is out in California, and they help advocate for wild wolves as well as provide sanctuary for wolf dogs in their care. But I think that just to like go back to what you were saying as well, the fear I think also kind of takes over and is like that kind of like blanket, right? And the more that we can learn and understand, the less that fear goes away. Or the more rather that fear goes away, that we're able to understand, oh, this isn't just a scary plant. This is just mugwort, or like this grows everywhere, or this is a coyote, and like they do get such a bad rap, but they're really nature's cleanup crew. They're gonna get all of those. I think that the biggest misconception with carnivores is that they're there to clean up the sick, the dying, the weak, to help create a healthier population of the animals that they hunt. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And some of the other animals that you talk about that I found very interesting and that like I have some designs about too are hyenas and cheetahs. The hyenas in particular I really love in regards to the female power. Maybe if you want to just like mention a little bit of how you weave their story in with in Earthly Bodies, because I really loved that particular chapter.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, hyenas are fascinating, and also another kind of malign creature quite often. If you look at movies like the what Lion King, the hyena is like this scavenger and sort of this pathetic, they're portrayed as sort of this pathetic creature. But the
Yeah.
reality is very, very different. Hyenas are incredibly intelligent, and they live in matriarchy, so they're female dominant. The females are much larger than the males. They pass kind of the maternal like lineage or sort of alpha through the female line. So there's sort of this like feminist icon in a way, and they're a
Yeah.
really fascinating species too because well, first of all, just to go back into the anatomy of a hyena is really amazing. So, because of the way they mate, it is actually literally impossible for a male to be aggressive and to rape a hyena. She literally has to sort of like extend her. I write about this in detail in the book, so I don't want to go into it in too much detail here. But
Right.
they're, it's literally physically anatomically impossible for a male hyena to rape a female hyena. So therefore, there's really no payoff for male aggression.
Mm.
So often they choose kind of the more, I don't know, sort of kinder males, so to speak. There's a researcher named Kay Holcamp who did incredible research on hyenas and hyena culture, and it's really thanks to her that we have all this information. And yeah, so there's like a sisterhood. It's a matriarchy, and it's the strength and cooperation. They live in a fission fusion society, which means it requires really complex communication because they hunt in large groups. So it's this incredible intelligence, this ability to cooperate, to take down large prey, and this kind of matriarchy that makes them so powerful. So, ultimately, it's like that they're more powerful together. And the analogy I make in the book is, it's the female prowess and this natural aggression, which are often told to tamp down. And that word is taken on so many negative connotations that that makes them who they are. And yet, in kind of the human landscape, women are often taught to shrink, to be smaller, consider the quote unquote weaker sex. And so, yeah, so I use hyenas to sort of reflect on that, on these sort of beauty myths that we've internalized. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they're a great symbol for that. I think it really fits very well together that they represent and especially through your lens of representing women's rage and how we could get hampered down, and in their society, in the hyena society, it isn't like that, and I think that's actually really inspiring. And which is why I just love Earthly Bodies in general, your book, because it's really nice to see these creatures in they're reflected in a way that is fully encompassing of like their whole nature.
Mm.
Do you think that also the more that we understand an animal's true nature and respect everything for the whole diversity that that animal is, like, do you think that that is a way to help people love each other more, like to see like through the lens of that, the more we can see and respect animals and love and appreciate them as they are, do you think that can help us as humans, as people, appreciate each other more and be like, oh well, that's that person's innate wilds, that person's innate nature?
I absolutely think so. Yeah. I mean, they're victims of this kind of these stereotypes and misunderstandings, just like, some people put stereotypes on other people or judgments or yeah. So I think there's an absolute parallel there for sure. Just accepting these animals for who they are, understanding, and just same thing with people. So yes, but obviously it's complex with people, much more complex in the sense that there are some, I was reflecting on this the other day and writing about it, how, we malign predators sometimes for, being vicious and killing deer, but really they only kill what they need in order to eat, to survive. That's it. No other animal kills because of stories and ideologies or, mythology that we have internalized or been conditioned to believe. So there is an aspect of, like, I wrote this book because I do hope to evoke more empathy in people, because there are aspects of people I have a difficult time accepting when it comes to extraction of earth, exploitation of others, cruelty to other animals. So those are aspects of people I won't accept. So so it's complicated.
Right.
So that's not, to me, that's like not being in alignment with our true nature. I believe, our true nature is to be a steward of our ecosystems, because extraction, exploitation is harming the earth and it's harming us. So,
Right.
so to kind of get to the core of your question, I think yes, if we're, when it comes to, respecting other cultures who aren't exploiting others, and absolutely, letting them do their thing, accepting people's sexual preferences, all of these things that don't cause anybody any harm whatsoever.
Right.
Yes. But when it comes to moving beyond the scope of human limitation in a way that harms others, that is unacceptable to me. And
That,
so I
yeah.
write these books, part of the reason anyway.
Right. That's a good point to add, is obviously there's some things that aren't right, like you said, they're just not integrating with each other, and I think that it's I'm trying to put the proper words to like what I'm thinking to try to like incorporate this, but you said it in such a beautiful way. And I think that the negative aspects we have to be careful of. And
Mhm.
that I was actually talking about this with one of my other friends, Sarah, who I think that's why I confused you with Reiki, because she does
Oh,
Reiki with wolves.
oh,
So
interesting.
but we talked about, the unfortunate thing that happened with the wolf that ran over in Wyoming. And just that I don't think that it aligns like with, I have a son, and I don't think that it aligns with me to have someone that's willing to just kill an animal like that. I think that it also shows that like their mentality, their way of thinking is often, it's like not a great way to integrate with society either. It's, to, if you're going to, because I think that you also talk about like like you had meat when you were in Scotland in the beginning of the book, and to source things safely and ethically and responsibly. If you're taking something and you're using every part of that animal as a hunter, and that feeds your family for a whole year, and you're respecting every part of that animal, that's completely different than just the annihilation of creatures to kill them just to kill them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting. I was having a conversation with somebody recently, well, often about eating, the ethics of food, and there's so many ways to look at that. And what I have come to now is that I look at the ecosystem as a whole when I eat. So it's not necessarily, I became a vegan when I was really young, when I was like roughly, I don't know, 13. Well, yeah, 13. It was slowly, and it was an emotional choice for me. It was, I didn't want to eat another animal. I loved other animals. I didn't want to cause harm in that way. I did not want to participate in factory farming or any of these like really violent, really harmful industries at all. And but what I realized later on is a lot of the veggie burgers and stuff I was eating when I was younger were causing just as much harm. So, for example, there are soy plantations that are clear cutting forest and killing a lot of animals that live there. It's crazy. There's some soy plantations in the Amazon and things like that. So, or any food source that contains palm oil, or even now I've stopped eating avocados because where I live in Massachusetts, avocados are typically flown in from Mexico, which is destroying monarch butterfly habitat. Like they go to this one place in Mexico, and there's also an aspect of human rights exploitation and abuses. So it's looking at things. It's not just I don't want to eat an animal because it makes me sad, and I don't want to hurt them, and obviously not wanting to be involved in the horrors of factory farming. But like you said, if an animal is hunted in the Scottish Highlands where I ate deer, during lockdown, which is I wound up being there for the majority of COVID, which is what I read about in the book. Getting vegetables shipped from overseas or from wherever was not the way. So we ate venison, which were culled on the land because there are no predators for the deer there. There's an overpopulation, and they are really decimating the landscape. So it's complicated. It's difficult. I still have an emotional, sometimes it's very emotional for me to eat other animals. But like I read about in the book, spending time with wolves helped me make peace with eating meat again. My body craved it. And so I do occasionally eat meat, but I definitely need to know how that meat is sourced. And I'm really, really, really fortunate to live in an area where there are a lot of regenerative organic farms around me. So I am able to eat totally locally, which I've made a commitment to do now, and it feels really, really good. So, the food comes from a local CSA, and I wildcraft as much food as possible, and I know where, if I do eat meat, where it comes from and how that meat was either hunted or raised. And so, again, I think that these polarities don't help, to say it's bad to eat, it's bad to do this, it's good to do this, but not thinking about where all of those ingredients come from and the impact they have on other humans, and the ecosystem as a whole. So to sum it all up, I basically eat and just with being as mindful as possible for the ecosystem as a whole. And without wolves in the ecosystem, there's an overpopulation of deer. In many places, there's wasting disease because of that. So that's also not a good way to
Right.
die. So, again, we could debate this whole, it's an interesting conversation. It's a complicated one, but I think if we
Right.
eat locally, that's the best we can try to do. It's not easy
Right.
for everybody.
Hi, Wild Ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is brought to you by my clothing brand FemmeSauvage, and I'm going to link that in the description below, along with a little discount code for you. Be sure to check it out. We also donate $5 with each of our animal designs towards specific charities. I will also have those in the description below. And enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much for listening. No, because it's unfortunate that the system that's presented to us, we really have to, again, be knowledgeable and learn and do a lot of research into making sure that what we're taking in and ingesting is the right way to do things. I also feel like that it's a great way. I was actually talking with my friend Harry Turner. I don't know if you've seen his documentary on Amazon Prime. It's called Wildcat,
No.
but I feel like it would be right up your alley. I'll send it to you
Mm.
afterwards. But what he's doing right now, he's a veteran, and it kind of is similar to what you're talking about. Is there isn't a right one shoe fit for conservation or for fixing things. Everything is really intricate. There isn't just a one clear cut answer. Like we were talking about, people say, oh, we just have to stop deforestation, but in these communities, these indigenous people, they're not doing it because they necessarily want to do it. They're trying to desperately survive. So in order to fix the environment, we actually have to help and aid the people there, so that way they're not taking that resource. And that's obviously just one example in that particular part of the world. Um that's obviously not, and like there's problems with every little intricate community. So I think that how do we, I guess, how do we uh how do we show people or make education easier access for um people that maybe aren't like us, that are actively trying to connect with it? Because I feel like that's also a problem, is how do we get everybody to connect in this way and show that nature is an intrinsic part of ourselves, and the more we heal and connect with nature, it's actually a benefit for us.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I want to go back to a little bit of what you said earlier, and just to kind of follow up on kind of what you touched on about access. So
Yeah.
there's this sort of going back to sort of like sourcing food and access is, there's this sort of like narrative that, oh, like eating locally and from organic CSA is bougie and it's not accessible to a lot of people. But one thing that's important is access to good food, right? So, and I will say that eating locally and from a CSA actually saved a lot of money
Hmm.
than buying a lot of packaged food, and so it's been saving money for me. And then the other thing to mention too, when I lived in Brooklyn, I was part of a community garden, which was $25 a year, and I grew a lot of my own vegetables there, and that was like more than I needed actually. So that was a way to source local food in the city. But there are a lot of food activists that are like, really advocating for food forests, free food, so it ultimately, if we rewind back, each one of us can, locate a time in our ancestry where our ancestors were hunter or gatherers and then subsistence farmers, really living in harmony with the ecosystem. So this knowledge is, with the way I see it, part of our genetic memory, right? This reconnecting with land, reconnecting with earth really activates that. It heals that in that respect. So in any way, to blend your question with the food sourcing question, if people have, everyone deserves access to land, so whether it's, the ability to join a community garden and grow food, or come together in your communities to create community gardens from abandoned lots, which is what people in New York City did. There's an organization called, I think it's 576 Acres, which locates abandoned lots to help people start community gardens. So grassroots efforts to do that are growing in some places, which I think is so great, which needs to continue to happen. So not only does that address the question of food access, but it also helps to build relationship with land because your hands are in the earth, you're growing your own food, you are just, that is an aspect of healing to me, that at least it has been for me and a lot of people that I know and have worked with. So having access to a place where you can grow food or harvest your own food or wildcraft, I think going back to what you were saying about there are different ways of addressing conservation, one model that I think is really harmful is this idea that humans need to be separate from nature. Nature needs to be protected from humans. What that does, and there's a lot of problems there in terms of, access for indigenous people, right? The whole national park system, kicked indigenous people off the land in order to protect the land. Meanwhile, many of those people are stewarding the land for thousands of years. And so when we don't interact with our ecosystems, we don't build relationship with our ecosystems. And then how are we going to become stewards if we're unable to interact with land? I think that is the key. That's critical. So I think education is the first part, but not education from an intellectual perspective. I think it's really dangerous. For example, some certifications and herbalism certifications that are strictly online. You need to be out in the land with the land. So I think finding people in your community, like for me, living in New York City, it was finding my nearest community garden. And I met a lot of elders there who had so much knowledge. And that's actually where I became interested in herbalism. This one woman, I was working in the community garden plot, and she was teaching me about beneficial weeds, which blew my mind wide open. Because as much as I was advocating for earth, also had plant blindness. I saw them as just quote unquote weeds when I didn't realize they were medicine that many cultures have used for thousands of years. So that was a really important pivot point for me. Joining that community garden just blew my world wide open. So I think, wherever you are, there has to be somebody with knowledge, a naturalist, an animal tracker, an herbalist, a farm where you can volunteer to get low cost CSA. There's lots of different things like that. So I think the more we do things like that, the more we get offline into nature, outdoors, learn about the edible and medicinal plants where you live, because there are going to be some no matter where you are. That is a really great place to start.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, one of my favorite things, honestly, about just my own house is to sit on my back porch and just listen to the birds. And I think over the last couple of years, I've gotten more and more into birding too. But being able to recognize your local wildlife and I'm not as good with plants, but I definitely, it's on my list to kind of I can recognize some things, but it's not my forte like animals are. But I think, like you said, the more that you can recognize, and I think that those resources are so great too, to also connect with people that are more knowledgeable than you, and you can learn from them in that subject. And also the second part to that being more hands-on too, and you can actually, there is something very important about seeing, feeling, touching, smelling. All those things will help you remember more.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said too. That's something I also always advocate, wherever you are, again, if you're in the city, maybe it's sitting in a park like Central Park or Prospect Park, those are the parks in New York City, and noticing who is around you, what birds do you see? I mean, because there's an amazing amount of wildlife in cities as well. Who are the birds that are there? What mammals kind of roam around the parks, the tree that you're sitting underneath. Just starting where you are is such a great way to reconnect with nature. And it's also intensely healing and grounding. I mean, I see it over and over and over again. And so, and also just remembering that you're in constant, like, the exhale of the trees as your inhale, we're interacting all the time, whether we realize it or not. So yeah, getting to know the species in your area, whether it's starting with, like you said, learning a bird call like that wakes you up in the morning. Who are they? And what do they need to survive? Also, that's really important because I've seen in some instances where people love the animals but don't realize that the plant that they're spraying is exactly the plant that they need. So I'm really interested more and more in these relationships in nature. If I love this plant, or if I love this animal, what do they need in order to thrive and survive? They're not isolated entities. They're part of a larger ecosystem.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have in our backyard, I think next year is kind of like we definitely want to start like a project on my back wall because I have a little retaining wall, but to kind of reintroduce more like natural fauna and like clean up any of the invasive species because right now we also have a lot of those lantern flies. I'm
Oh,
yeah. So, and my husband has now become very passionate about that because of my passion. So he's like, oh, yeah, no, these lantern flies, they're on this invasive plant that they like. I'm cutting it all down. It's coming out. So, um, even through like showing like our love, like we can inspire like other people that love us that maybe aren't even um as knowledgeable. So
mhm.
uh I think that's like also a big part of your book is to like and kind of like my like uh saying is to find your wild is to find your inner nature and like
Mhm.
what speaks to you and like what like to find yourself and to recognize that and to be one with yourself, you're going to be much happier and in a place to be able to give more, especially to the land and to nature. You're going to be happier finding yourself and what your own nature is.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Do you think that also like nature I think is so inspiring for our mental health too because it helps us to be in the now?
hmm Yeah, this is just making me think of a writing class. I teach a writing class in partnership with Project Coyote called Writing for the
Oh,
Wild. And one of our exercises is sensory awareness. So to go outside and just really write down what you can see, what you can smell, what you can touch, what it brings up for you emotionally, what you can hear. And sensory writing really brings us into the moment. It moves beyond sort of the spiraling in our minds. You just are writing down everything that is happening to you and that you're noticing right now. So whether it's like the wind against your skin, what does that feel like? How would you describe that? Maybe it's like the scent of a local wildflower that you can smell, or hearing a particular bird song. So sensory writing is a way to bring us into the moment in nature. And if we don't have anything to write, being in nature and really attuning our sensory awareness can bring us into the present moment. That's really, really helpful because obviously, wherever we go, there we are. So we can be in nature and our heads could be somewhere else. So
right.
sensory awareness, really feeling your feet on the earth, really listening to the sounds around you if you're lucky enough to be in a place where the majority of what you hear is birdsong and not traffic.
Right.
So
Right.
bringing yourself to a place where that is, what you're surrounded by. And again, even in the city, if I went deep into the park, that's what I would hear. I wouldn't hear the noise of the city anymore. So yes, being in nature and then taking some really deep breaths to ground yourself and really attuning to what you notice. And I feel like the magic of writing and in that sense is you're choosing what to focus your attention on and where you're placing your energy. So if I were, sitting in nature writing about, something else entirely, I could be writing about wolves sitting in Brooklyn, that's what I'm focusing my attention on. I'm not necessarily present, but I'm still writing about something that's meaningful to me. So, but sensory writing really does bring you very, very much into the moment, and that is deeply, deeply healing.
Yeah, I love that too. That's definitely a practice I think I'm gonna try in the mornings before I get my son to school. I like that. Because I think that also writing helps me remember too. And I think that
Mhm.
that's also a really easy, great way for somebody that maybe wants to start connecting with nature. Like that's a really easy and nice way for someone to, and relatable, right? Like, oh, I can just grab a notebook, sit outside, and what do I
Funny.
hear? What do I sense? Like that's really accessible to people. That's a really great way to get them to start that. And I guess this is like a little bit off topic, but one of the things that you do is wild voices, which I really love. Could you maybe like explain or go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's called Wild Voices Collective. We're launching probably early next year. So it's kind of it's creating a bridge between wildlife organizations I've worked in partnership with for many years and artists who are in my community. So the idea came from a time when I was at the Jaguar Rescue Center. My close friend Ankar, and you've read about that in the book, and anybody who reads the book will learn a lot about her and the Jaguar Rescue Center. Basically, a lot of wildlife organizations are just, in a constant state of emergency. They're rescuing animals every single day. And so, a lot of their outreach is about the animals. And yet, part of the root problem obviously is the deforestation and the gentrification and all the Airbnbs going into that area of Costa Rica. So I was like, oh my gosh, we have to protect this area of rainforest. And it's like they just don't have the bandwidth to do it all. And,
Right.
and then I think about artists. I have so many artists in my community who are so passionate about conservation. They want their artwork to make a difference. And so I thought, okay, why not connect the dots? Why not, pair the artist in, this select group of artists in my community with a wildlife organization to help raise funds and awareness for their message. And art has a way of touching us. I have even though the site hasn't launched officially yet, I have a shadow puppet video on there from the far woods. I don't know if you watch that, but every
Yeah,
single time I watch it, it's called Wolf, You Are Home. It makes me cry.
I'm
It
gonna watch it after
There's
this.
no words, there's no statistics, but it taps into something, an emotional place within us. And I think that's sometimes what we need to do. We need to feel, sometimes
Yeah.
we're just so overwhelmed with all of the messages of gloom and doom. And sometimes statistics are thrown our way, this amount. It's more difficult to comprehend. But a piece of art, whether it's visual art or music or writing, can reach, deep into our bodies. And sometimes I think we need to tap into our empathy, our emotional connection to these other animals and to land to evoke change or to evoke a response. So ultimately, Wild Voices Collective is a collective of artists, and everything we do raises funds and awareness for partner organizations. Um, and so we're going to officially launch probably early next year. We're going to have a Substack as well. And yeah, so it's all about, art and advocacy for the wild. There'll be some courses involved with that as well.
That's so cool and beautiful, and I think that it's incredibly inspiring too, and to be able to incorporate, especially like artists that use their heart and soul to create pieces, and to incorporate these uh the charities that really need our help and focus, and like you said, their bandwidth is just like, at capacity,
Yeah.
and their hearts are in the right place. They're doing what they can for, their charities. So it's a great way to help take the load off of them and help the actual behind, like the the core of the problem, but within a creative way with art. My friend Sarah also, she's the one that works with the wolves, and she also says that one of her great things that she says is that we need to start, feeling with our heart. I think that balance is great, science is great. Science shows us, facts and what we need to know, but we, like you said, need to connect with our hearts and to feeling, because that's how we're gonna really care and connect with animals and with nature. That's gonna be the main way to help people show that nature is important and that it is in part a part of us, not separate from us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then ultimately it's a win-win for everyone because it amplifies the incredible work of these artists. They amplify the work of these organizations. So it's just a way to come together in community and leverage each other's work. I feel like that's
Yeah.
what we really need right now are communities of resilience, really amplifying, the work that's happening on the ground where these wildlife organizations are making like a tangible difference. And then this work that comes from, whatever it is we feel compelled to communicate as artists that can, like you said, really reach into people's hearts and affect change. So I just feel like bridging the two together. And so it's just starting. We're going to see how, it's just inspiring to be in a group of really creative people and, changing the story, changing the narrative. The more people involved in this conversation, the better,
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the premise behind it.
I really love that. And just, I wish the best for you with that. And I know it's going to do really well because I think what's cool about now, too, is there's all these really unique avenues for people to take that they're finding themselves in this new world, in this new space, and to be able to come up with like these courses. When I was in school and college, like I would see specific classes and I'd be like so interested in that. But now there isn't like anything to hold you back. If you want to take a course, if you want to learn more, there are these really cool avenues that you can take. And especially like what you're doing with the wild voices and the artists finding what feels right for them. And like you said, that their message that they want to put out and to incorporate into this unique venture with the charities. And it's just a way for everybody's hearts to be full and aligned and to do
Exactly.
something good. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody wins.
Yeah.
It's ultimately a simple framework, whatever if somebody feels inspired to create on behalf of one of these organizations, great. But there's no, there's no deadline necessarily. It's like, okay, whatever you feel called to create and then, how can we come together to really raise funds and awareness for these particular initiatives. So one of the first ones that we have on the website is helping to save La Ceiba Nature Reserve, which is I wrote an article about recently, and I won't go too much into it now because it's on the site. And the article is with online with Terrain magazine, but essentially is what I was speaking about. It was, there's a lot more deforestation in Costa Rica than people realize. It's sort of, people think of it as this sort of this ecotourism haven, and yet the reality is a lot more complex than that. So, so there's this area of primary rainforest that really needs to be protected. So because there's so much biodiversity there, and yeah, it's really critical. So helping the Jaguar Rescue Center protect and buy that forest in order to protect it for the other animals is part of our initiative. As is, coexistence in partnership with Project Coyote and also helping to one other thing I'm really passionate about is wildlife corridors. So, one of the intentions is to work with Wildlands Network on that as well.
Yeah, the wildlife corridors, wildlife crossings. I know that's really big for the red wolves right now. I know that they have an initiative and people they have like a good donation going towards that. But I don't know, I don't think they're at their goal yet. But especially and I also talk about in a previous podcast, but those wildlife corridors, those wildlife crossings are again, like, and I think what people need to understand is like the more we heal nature, it's actually going to heal ourselves, because safety wise, you're not going to hit an animal with your car. Like, you're not going to get hurt yourself. And in tune, you're going to protect that animal and nature. And there isn't going to be, hopefully, we can work on the balance with nature because it's so out of balance. The more that, nature has its own balance, we've just disrupted it as humans, unfortunately. Um,
Mm.
so I think that's really important work. And there are so many, like you said, different things that need to be focused on. So what the artists are called to focus on with these charities, I'm excited to see all of them that come out.
Yeah, yeah, I am too.
That's awesome. Well, Vanessa, I feel like that's a really great place to end for today. Do you want to let people know where they can reach you? Anything else besides Wild Voices that you have coming out? I know you have an amazing Substack that I'm subscribed to as well.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I'm an ambassador for Project Coyote, and I offer a writing course in partnership with them called Writing for the Wild, and 50% of the proceeds goes to Project Coyote. And the class itself has been absolutely amazing. We recently finished our first cycle of the courses. There's one seminar, which is much more intimate. It's only open to 8 people. And so that is an area where we can really, receive feedback and read each other's work. And then there's a lecture series, which also is just really amazing and went really, really well. And, the premise of the course is really posing a question, how do we use writing to evoke empathy and action for our wild kin, so this is not only a course I'm facilitating, but this is a question I'm consistently asking myself. Can we change these narratives? Can we really, what is the most impactful way to write on behalf of the wild? And so we're exploring this through the course as well, and some of the writing that's come out of it has been really, really amazing. Some of that will be on the Wild Voices Collective Substack as well. So there's that course. I'm launching a new cycle of that in January, which I'm excited about. And a lot of people involved in the course already work on behalf of wildlife. We've had wildlife people who work in wildlife rehabilitation, wildlife photographers in the course, just who want to find ways to use writing to amplify their work and to get these certain stories out there to the general public. So that's one thing that's happening that's really exciting. And like you said, Wild Voices Collective, that'll be launching soon. So the website is wildvoicescollective.com. Like I said, it's still sort of in the works, but you can read about some of the artists that are involved. There are a couple more that aren't yet to be on the website, and some of the initiatives that are there. Weeds, Wolves, and Wild Women is my Substack. And then, of course, Earthly Bodies just came out at the end of September.
Yes,
and you can kind of
I
read.
love it.
Oh, thank you. So you can read
Really
more about that there. Yeah. And you can always reach me on my website. And locally,
awesome.
I coach boxing again. I'm coaching boxing, which has been awesome. So,
It's
doing
amazing.
a lot of work with the local community here as well. And, coming up in spring, I'll be doing more work, potentially a stewardship apprenticeship with some friends of mine in the area. So
That's so lovely.
yeah.
That's awesome. And just wanted to say about your book too. I mean, the way that you weave your words, like it's I don't want to say it's an easy read, but it's like so digestible. It's really, you have such a beautiful way of writing that's I've been flying through this book. So I would highly recommend it. I think you really do such a great way of easily showcasing the animals and referencing it back to yourself. Was very relatable, and I think that a lot of people can take a lot out of your books. So I can't wait to also read your Awakening Artemis series. And then I also wanted to mention how I first found you actually was, I know this is dedicated to a more younger, or they said 12 and up, but the Animal Wisdom, a
Oh,
guided journal for connecting with nature. I really love this. I actually took it off of, I have it in the back over here too.
Oh, wow.
So a part of my bookshelf, but I wanted to bring this out because this is also a really great way for people, like that you have like a little notebook too for people to kind of like we were talking about, if they want to sit down and like, you know, start their morning and listen to nature or whatever, if they want to connect with a specific animal, you have a lot of really great animals in here to connect with as well. That's also one of my favorites of yours.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah,
You're
that one was
welcome.
Sterling Teen. So yeah, but of course it's for any age.
Yeah, that's why I feel like I wanted to share it because, like, you know, it says it's for teens, but I'm like, this I picked up. I was like, no, this is amazing. I'm still really into this. It's I think for all ages, but or at least anybody that can start to write. So, um, Vanessa, thank you so much for your time and for such a beautiful chat and connection. And you put such beautiful work out into the world, and I'm very excited to see what you have coming forward.
Oh, thank you so much. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. All right, wild ones, thank you so much for everyone for listening today, and we will catch you on the next one. Have a great day.
Yeah,
Bye.
crawl